So you graduated, and what are your plans then? And at what point do you start thinking about what do I do after graduation? When does that kick in?
Probably around the winter of my last year in school, I came to the realization that I have a piece of paper in my hands that says "Moreh mechanech b'Yisrael."
Mm.
Well, I might as well use it. I wasn't trained for any profession. And by the way, our training in teaching skills was a little less than abysmal. Well,
So, okay.
Pinchas Horgan, our dean, had a brother, Gershon Horgan. We call him Pinky and Ginky. Ginky was a great Israeli poet, but you can't make panosa from being a great Israeli poet. So they gave him a job teaching in the Bet Midrash Lamorim. He's a great Hebraist. And one of the subjects that he taught was pedagogia.
Mm-hmm.
Pedagogy for those who are not in the language. What he knew about pedagogy, you could put in the walnut shell with the walnut still in it.
Everyone needs a parnasa.
So I remember the two things that he taught us in pedagogy as being vital if you're going to be able to teach. One is you should never toss a piece of chalk in the air like this.
That's bad. Bad form.
That's bad. And you should not dry wash your hands.
That's also not good. And
That was my pedagogy.
There you go. You're ready to teach now.
I was ready to teach.
Ready to go. Okay.
So when I came to realization that I have this piece of paper, I went to the placement office.
Oh, they had a placement office.
They had a placement office. And I said, I want to be referred for a job, teaching when I graduate. So they sent me, I think, to Ramaz. Ramaz was an outstanding,
Upper East Side.
outstanding
Still is.
evening, days ago.
Still is, and very expensive.
Yeah. The kids at Ramaz knew more than I did. I couldn't hack it at Ramaz. No way I could make it.
That's problematic, okay?
Yeah. So I went back and asked for another referrals. Somehow there were no referrals in the city of New York. I guess all the Hebrew schools dried up. Well, by March, I was willing to go as far north as Greenwich.
Okay.
Well, not quite there. Maybe Yonkers.
Yonkers, okay.
Yonkers, maybe. Nothing.
Your plan was still to be living at home, presumably, and
Yeah.
work.
By April, nothing materialized. Kept on hounding the office.
Your circle is widening in terms of how far you're prepared to go.
I was willing to go as far as Westchester. Nothing. So my man was willing to go to Honolulu, find me a job. So they found me a job in Boston with Rabbi Karsh in Fessenden Street Shul, which was in Mattapan, a suburb of Boston. I was to replace a gentleman whom I knew well, Sri Berger, who was a very fine teacher. And I was supposed to be the teacher and director of the school.
Director.
Yeah.
You had never taught yet. You didn't have any students.
I was by myself. I was alone. There was nobody else.
Right.
Now I have to describe the school for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a small Orthodox shul, and the kids met in the synagogue when the services weren't in session.
Mm-hmm.
So for Mincha, that's always out. All right?
This is a day school.
No, this is afternoon school.
Afternoon school.
Afternoon school. I knew from curriculum, I knew from... I had absolutely no help because this school was not affiliated with the BJE in Boston, which had a reputation in those days that the director could put a pin in any school and tell you exactly what the kids are studying in that town. There was regiments throughout the city.
But not where you're teaching?
No.
No.
So I had no help from there. The rabbi was hands-off, although he wanted me to be, I guess, a companion to his teenage son. I was ready to be a companion to a teenage son. So those poor kids really had to put up with terrible things.
So is it just you?
Just me. Just me.
I mean, no other teaching staff?
No.
Just you?
Just me.
How many kids?
I don't know, a handful of kids. 40, 50 kids in different classes.
And you have them every day?
I think it was 3 times a week. It's memory fails a little bit. It's been some while. So I taught them a little bit of reading Bab Orbeh and some Baba Masters, whatever. I had a 2-year contract. At the end of the first year, we mutually agreed.
You and the rabbi?
Yeah, that I will not return for the second.
And you're okay with this, yes?
I was delighted.
Can get it.
Although I must say that I had a marvelous time in Boston. Boston's a wonderful Jewish town. And I found a room with a Jewish family. Now, you got to remember, this is not a town. Next to it is Dorchester. Next to Dorchester is what's it called? Another suburb. The name comes to me, and then after it is the names don't come.
Newton?
Anyhow,
Newton?
No. Brookline.
Oh, Brooklyn.
Brookline. But between Brookline and Dorchester was Roxbury.
Okay.
Roxbury. So I worked in Metapan. I had a house, a room with a family in Dorchester, which was very nice. I had my meals with a Jewish family that had boarders and meals in Roxbury. And I dated girls from Revere and whatever.
So that introduces an interesting category here. You're starting to date now.
Not really too much, but I'm starting to fantasize.
Okay, but not prior to you're taking your first job in Boston. No, you didn't date in high school at all.
No.
You didn't date in college at all.
No.
Your friends did.
Well, I did try once. Had a date once with a girl from Kandahari Country Club, but she lived in New Jersey, and I lived in the Bronx.
That wasn't going anywhere.
And neither of us had a car. No.
That wasn't practical.
But that was about it.
When you're living in Boston, do you have a car? Do you know how to drive yet?
No.
Still don't know how. How are you getting around?
Buses.
And
They had a very interesting, probably still to this day, Boston interesting thing. They have a combination buses and subway that's interactive, and the stations, and usually they have exits and entrances in 4 different areas for each station, and each one is a different name. So it can be spring and summer or whatever.
depending what side of the street you're on, you don't know where you're going.
Very confusing. But they had, I lived a life of Riley.
Chevra?
I met the Chevra from the Young Israel in Roxbury, and we made some friendships. Some of them came to my wedding. We would sing and schmooze all through the night. We're going to Fenway Park and sing Today You Don't Go Tonight at Fenway Park. It was very, very nice. I'd go down to the public library, whatever. It was very, very nice.
Some of the Zmiros that you have till this day from your Boston
Yeah.
years.
The Nefesh and so forth. I learned there. My brother Hesh became friends with some of that cover later on too.
When did Hesh live in Boston at a certain point?
No, but he met them through me. I was going to say something else, I forget already. What?
So you're there for a year.
I was there for a year, and then I found myself back in the streets of New York,
Living back at home again?
living back at home.
Oh, I'm sorry, before you go there, how much are you being paid for this?
Oh, some paltry amount. I don't know what.
Okay.
$1,500, $2,000. I don't know what.
Okay.
It will be up in my tax papers. You can look it up.
Maybe we'll look
I
at
still have that. And I went back to the placement office, looking for a job. And they obviously didn't have anything. As I'm walking out there and walking the street on the Washington, on Amsterdam Avenue, I bump into Dr. Joe Noble. Dr. Joe Noble had been the registrar at the TI when I was studying there. He wasn't that much older than us, but he was he had served in the Navy during the war and told us how some anti-Semitim got on him, and Yom Kippur they had him swab the deck, and they looked at him and said, Dr. Joseph Dover, University, swabbing the deck on Yom Kippur.
He's a doctor, though, at this point. A doctor.
He was a doctor. He was a doctor. But he wasn't. I was at this point. This would be 1950. So how old was I? I was 22. Well, he may have been 28. Whatever.
Okay.
So I bumped into him and he says, "Hey, what are you doing here?" I said, "I went into the place and to look for a job." He says, "Why don't you come up with me to Rochester?" He had just taken a position as the director of the bureau in Rochester, replacing Joe Diamond, who retired. And I said, sure, why not? So that's how I got to Rochester, and I became a Hebrew teacher in the Hillel Day School at a magnificent sum of $3,400 a year.
But you weren't working for Joe.
No.
He just said, why don't you come up to Rochester also?
He was recruiting teachers.
Okay. Okay. But that's
one of his jobs at the bureau was to find teachers.
And that's why he was at YU.
Right.
So this was a really Bashert kind of situation.
For both of us. If I hadn't met Joe Noble at that time, I would never have met your mother. You wouldn't be here.
Right. Amazing. So you're teaching at Hillel Academy.
So I went to Hillel School, which was an Orthodox school affiliated with the Mizrahi organization, whatever. Small school. They had bought a mansion on East Avenue in Rochester, which was a very fancy neighborhood. And when I first moved in, there was a gorgeous place. And I was teaching two classes of small classes, probably 12, 15 kids in the class.
Dad, we're just going to take a break just for half a minute. We'll be right back, okay?
Yes, sir.
Hold on, don't go far.
Yeah, that one Max about the thing.
Okay, that's a quick little commercial break. And now you have your glaze latte to keep you company. We were talking about you're back from Boston. You've connected with Dr. Joe Noble. He's recruiting you up to Rochester. You're teaching in Hillel School. That's a Talmud Torah, or that's a
Today school.
Today school. How big are, and what's you're teaching? You're a teacher. What's your job?
I'm a teacher, a Hebrew teacher, a Jewish studies teacher. There was a principal who was a woman who didn't know anything about the Yiddishkeit. She was an English teacher, general studies teacher. So basically, the curriculum was set up, I guess, by Dr. Diamond before John Noble took over, and at least in theory, Noble was supposed to be in charge of that. But there was some sort of education committee that probably was in charge of it too. But basically, there was no Hebrew studies principal. So to some extent, I took over some of those responsibilities. There were two other teachers who taught Hebrew studies. and we were a very, very close-knit, small family of people. One was a young Lebanese rabbi who ran a synagogue for Oriental Jews, and we became good friends. Your mother and his wife later became very good friends. Another was the wife of a Hebrew poet, and I wish I knew as much as she did. She was big as a house, and she was in charge of the kindergarten, and she danced with the kids and was a hippopotamus dancing, with the elves. But she was a very sweet lady. The school was in constant financial problem. There weren't really that many big contributors. The one great white father in town was not as generous perhaps as he might have been, or maybe wasn't able to be more generous. I don't know. So there were always dry spells in the school, but it was okay. Rochester really was my watershed years, because I came to Rochester as a yingler who didn't know what he wanted, and developed an adult there. Became a teacher there, became a person. I lived in the JY, which was the Jewish Young People's...
It's like the JCC, but it had housing.
Right. And I met some very nice young people there, including one Orthodox fellow from Cleveland, Mike Hoffer, with whom I grew to be very close. And as a matter of fact, he came to my wedding too. Mike and I would talk a lot and stuff. And for Shabbos, at first I would have meals with the Jewish family, and I would set up with them, and the meals were feh. I couldn't stand it. But there was a small Jewish deli that closed for Shabbos. But I talked with them, and they opened up special just for Mike and me. And we'd get 2 challahs and a bottle of wine and a full chicken and side dishes enough to feed a horse, and dessert. And we'd pay all $5, I think, between the two of us. And we'd sit down and we'd eat, and we'd sing mirrors and bench, and the onus kwelt,
This is not Fox's Deli.
No, this was not Fox's. This was Barney's. Barney's.
And that was within walking distance to the JY?
Yeah. Well, walking, there was nothing at that time. I could walk to Buffalo. I mean, so I lived in the Y, and we meals. There was a luncheonette or something in the Y. We'd have meals there, but for Shabbos meals, I'd go to Barney's. I was making this magnificent $3,400 a year. I was sending home $50 a month, which was a lot of money. So you look for additional income wherever you can. So I became a teacher in the Sunday school of Temple. What was it? Brit Kodesh, Holy Circumcision Temple. And I teach the kids the alphabet or something.
This is Sundays?
Sundays. I was a specialist. I got a job in an afternoon school someplace, and Dr. Noble asked me to take a class over of adults to teach them Hebrew. These are mostly older ladies.
Where, at the JCC?
At the JCC. Mostly elder ladies who looked for something to do at the time. When I became engaged to your mother, she joined the class too. And she told me not to call on her because You know who kept me up last night.
Was she in the class prior to your meeting her, or only subsequent to?
No.
Uh-huh.
It was an interesting group of people. I may have told you of the time when early in the semester, 2 or 3 sessions might have passed, and a little old lady comes up, and you can see she's really, she wants to be there, but she doesn't want to be there. And she's looking for every excuse not to be there. And she says to me in the heavy Yiddish accent, she says, Mr. Frankel, maybe I shouldn't have come. After all, you've already had 2 sessions, 3 sessions. You've covered so much ground that I'll never be able to catch up. And I'm trying to hang on to her.
Why?
That's a good question. I mean, one isn't being paid on a piecemeal, per person. But ego, I guess. You don't want to lose it. No. So I look at this Pashon and I say to her, looking at you and hearing you, I get the impression you grew up in a good Jewish home. And you'd be surprised how much Hebrew is spoken in a Jewish home that you